Hi, I am Ravi Tangri, and I am here with the first of series of 22 profiles of incredible entrepreneurs. What I want to explore this month is the passion of entrepreneurship. So, what is it that fuels entrepreneurs to get them to actually leave the job option and create something just on their will, their passion, and defying sometimes what everybody else says. So every weekday in June, I am going to be interviewing an amazing entrepreneur at 9 a.m. Pacific time, noon Eastern time, 1 o'clock Atlantic time where I am, and 5 o'clock GMT. So please join me. And I'm absolutely delighted to kick off this series with a dear friend from my professional association. We actually served on a national board together several years ago, Janet Stewart, who runs We Love Learning. Welcome, Janet.
Thanks so much, Robbie. It's great to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. So, Janet, what I'd like to do maybe is just to start off, can you share how your entrepreneurial journey began? What was it that actually made you say, I'm going to go out and start a business and let's see where this goes?
Well, I think to be honest, we'd have about 8 years old because I had a really kick-ass lemonade stand at the end of the driveway. And I've been an entrepreneur all of my life. In fact, that's how I worked my way through college. I had a business in the basement of our home making pine cone wreaths. And I had a marketing plan. I had a sales team, which was my mom. She worked in a big building in an office in downtown Toronto, and she took one in one day, and then all the orders came. So I used to go to school by day, and then I'd sit at night in the darkness of this unfinished basement with all my pine cones around me. I had a procurement department. That was my grandparents because they loved going walking in the Don Valley and other whatever forest they could find. And so they would collect pine cones for me every single day of the season and then bring them to me. And they'd even started sorting them for me. So they'd sort them into different sizes. And I'd sit there in the basement with all these bags of pine cones around me and make these wreaths. So that was really my first business that had a true profit and loss, and I made enough money to pay for my books and my tuition and things like that. And from there, I've always had a small private practice on the side, even when I had for a short period of time a job, as you would say. I actually took some jobs so that I could shore up my credentials and I didn't think I could go out and teach about things if I didn't actually have some experience in the workplace first. But I always had a private practice on the side, and then it's been 20 years since I was in a traditional job.
So what is it about creating your own business, about running your own show that has fueled you from that age? I mean, that's absolutely incredible that drive, that passion's been there, and it sounds like the job, like you say, was a means to an end when you took it.
Yeah, it was a conscious decision to take a couple of jobs over the years so that I could strategically build my credentials and take advantage of really frontline positions in companies so that I could really understand the mechanics of frontline workers in large organizations and in different sectors. So it was always a means to an end, and I never intended, I shouldn't say this too loud, but I never intended to stay that long. And I had a plan. I was one of those people who had a plan from 20 or so, and I had a long-term plan, and a long-term plan was to be my own business eventually. That was a full-time business. So I think I'm a control freak, probably. I like being in control, and I like and a lot of people think of entrepreneurship as insecure, but I have the opposite mindset. I think that there is no more secure job in the world than the one that you create yourself.
So let's dive into that, because that really is, I believe, a huge perception out there is that, oh my God, all the risk, all of this. And you're right. People with a JOB, you're at the mercy, if you will,
Yeah,
of
you're always at
those
the mercy
out
of
there.
someone else and their decisions. But when you're the business owner, for sure, there's long hours, and there are times, especially early on, when you think, oh, how am I going to meet payroll? How am I going to get all those bills paid? But I also think that you're in complete control of what your sales figures are, because you set the targets, and then if you need more business to pay the bills, you just go get more business. And I know that sounds pretty simple. It's not that simple, but at the end of the day, you are in charge of making it work. And I like that.
So how did that "we love learning" took shape? What is it? Because I know how passionate you are about that over the last several years. How is it that that evolved?
Well, I've changed brands many times, even since I've known you. I guess it's part of my restlessness, and which is probably another trait of a longpreneur, I would call myself. Uh, but I've had different brands over the years, but I'm an instructional designer by trade. That's my background. My education is in teaching and in learning, and not in a school system setting, but in a workplace setting. And if we go back many years ago, I was actually a competitive figure skater, and then I became a figure skating coach. And I wrote a book early on. I was all of like 21 years old. I had zero experience, but somehow I wrote a book, and that got some national attention. And then I worked for the Canadian Figure Skating Association, which is now called Skate Canada. And I wrote the National Coaches Training Certification Program. And that's when I made the leap from teaching children into teaching adults. And it was a few years after that I began that job, that I started to look at the corporate world. And at that time, the word coach was not used. It was all boss and supervisor. We didn't use words like team leader. And I remember saying to someone, if only you would apply the principles that we do for creating high performance athletes, you could create high performing employees. And then I eventually, a couple of years after that, I made the leap over into the corporate sector and started teaching that kind of stuff. I taught, mainly I taught leadership and change and leading change, and became known in that space. But at the end of the day, I was always still an instructional designer, which meant you could throw any content in front of me and I could figure out how to teach it well, and write that training program and maybe hand it off to a subject matter expert who didn't have a lot of teaching experience. Oops. Looks like I'm here all by myself. Oh, there you're back. You're back.
Let's go back to how this started for you, because you said that you've always had this. What is it that you think built this entrepreneurial drive in you?
I think I come from a family of self-starters. My dad was a champion race car driver and had his own business, which became his lifetime of work. My mom did work in a large company. Oh my gosh, you all went dark. Are you still there, Ravi? Okay, sorry.
I am.
Okay, good. I guess I'll have to click the screen every once in a while. It went to sleep. My mom worked in a large organization, but my grandparents and my aunt and my mom all ran all this other stuff kind of on the side. And so it just was the way it was in my family. You created something out of nothing constantly. Like that was just what you did every single day that you woke up. And so I learned from very early on to just create something out of nothing. And I loved teaching. There were these, my grandfather worked in a very a poor neighborhood of Toronto, and he ran a children's program, and there were these other little girls who didn't know much English and had just immigrated to Canada. And from at like 7 or 8 years old, I took it upon myself to teach them English. And so I was making word finds and word searches and crossword puzzles that were all age appropriate. And that was that was sort of what I loved doing from the very, very beginning. So I knew I would teach in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, so that teaching element was a constant, really, through your figure
Yeah.
skating coaching, through the instructional design, all of that. That came through it all.
Yeah, and my aunt taught ballet and jazz. My grandmother taught arts and crafts. My grandfather taught every sport imaginable. My mom taught badminton. My dad was a race car driver, taught other drivers in the years to follow. So teaching was just a normal thing in my family, and creating something out of nothing was a normal thing. So for me, it's like there never was a different pathway for me. My career path hasn't really ever changed.
Okay, so that actually gets to what I think is one of the key things, is that an entrepreneur, in my mind, is synonymous with passion, that there's a passion that you're fulfilling through your work. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I love, like, excuse me, nowadays we become, over the last decade, we become experts in designing online learning solutions. And so as a learning experience designer, I love the intrigue when someone dumps a big old ugly bucket of content in front of me, like a folder or a binder that is just a disaster and a mess, and you have to try to make sense of it. I mean, that's not the most fun part of the process, but once you do make sense of it, reimagining it in an online world where you and the learner are not there at the same time, it's like a puzzle. In fact, my husband said to me the other day, he says, it's like you're always solving puzzles. And I feel that way. Like, I feel it's really interesting to look at this content and think about who's the learner, what's the learning objective, how are they going to achieve it, or how are they going to consume it rather on a desktop versus a mobile, for example. And then how can we reimagine that content in a way that will be really engaging for the learner and that will achieve the learning objectives.
I can hear that in your voice as you're talking about it, and I know from conversations with you, there's a joy that comes out when you're exploring different things, whether it's the virtual reality options or some things we've looked at since COVID hit about, how do we engage people? You really have a passion that shines through with all of that.
I do, and I hats off to many people who are embracing virtual meetings and virtual presentations in this last few months. I'm glad the rest of the world has joined me here in the virtual world that I've been living in by myself, or not by myself, because you've been in that virtual world for a long time as well. But I think it's really important. It's one thing to have good lighting and a good microphone and good bandwidth and all of those things. Those are like the baseline. But then once you're online with your learners, you need to be taking another step further, and you need to be engaging. And that doesn't just mean going, like you be engaging, because that's just a turn off. But how do you involve the learners? How do you interest them? How do you engage them? How do you get them away from the screen? I've done sessions recently where I'll put up a QR code, and then I'll ask everybody to grab their phone, scan the QR code, and then something happens on their phone that I have prearranged to happen. So that takes work, and it takes thought, and it takes, like, I don't know, a little ingenuity, but a lot of creativity to think, how can I pull them away from the screen and get them to actually pick up their phone and do something with that, and then have an experience that they need their phone and me on the screen at the same time in order to completely be a part of. Otherwise, they're likely to just zone in and out, or stay zoned out quite a bit, really.
Absolutely. It's really easy to disengage. The example I give is conference calls, right?
Yeah.
If it's not your conference call, what did you do? You would put it on mute, and you'd be sitting away working on your emails.
Yep. We're all guilty of that.
People will do with video if you do not have them engaged. They'll mute it, turn off their video, and do that. And so what I want to get to is, as an entrepreneur, you've been at it all of your life. I think for me, it's 29 years now. There's always times when caca hits the fan. And when you're the business owner, the buck stops with you. There's
Yeah.
not necessarily a lot of support. What is it that you've found you do to be able to support yourself through those times where you're going, oh my God, I don't know where, what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go?
I don't know if I'm very good at that because I just give up sleep and things like that and eat a lot of chocolate. I mean, these are my real coping mechanisms, to be real. But I can think of a time a couple of years ago when business was just really good, really solid, had been for 20 years, and had become very dependable. And then some things happened with one of our very large clients that really changed all of that. And I had to be disciplined to go back to the basics. I had to diversify more. I had become too dependent on a smaller group of clients, which the kind of work we do, we tend to have long-term relationships with clients over many, many, many years. And so we go very deep into organizations and stay with them for a long time. But that can also breed a certain level of complacency. And because that's where we were at, and this change hit me kind of unexpectedly from the side, I found myself having to act as if I was a startup all over again. And maybe it wasn't that treacherous, maybe it wasn't really that bad, but that's the mindset that I went to. Like, I went back to basics, and I peeled back as if I was starting out and had, zero money in the bank and zero sales in the hopper and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't that case, but I treated it like as if it was, because I didn't know where that situation was going to go. And I just returned to all the basics and to the discipline of doing all the things that I don't necessarily love doing. I mean, I've written an e-newsletter and published it on the second Tuesday of every month for 20 years without fail. For a period of time, we changed it to Thursdays at 10 a.m., but then we moved back to Tuesdays. So it's that discipline. And I don't necessarily always feel like writing, but I have to write. I have to do it because it's important, and that newsletter, I am always amazed. The thing that keeps me writing it too is that out of the blue, someone will be like, oh, Janet, I'm so glad. I need you to help us with this. And there'll be somebody who I have not seen for 10 years, and I have not thought about them, but they think about me I'm sorry, subscribers. I've not necessarily thought about them, but they've thought about me every, second Tuesday of every month when they get my newsletter.
Well, let's go back to that moment when you said that client pulled out, right?
Yeah.
So what was it, if you were to slow things down, what was it that pulled you away from the chocolate to, okay, I need to get back to basics? If you could sort of slow down that journey, how did you shift away from that unhealthy coping to what you need to do and the basics?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the DISC model of communication. There's the DIS and C. And so I'm a DI, which means I get a good idea and I run with it. And I don't necessarily stop and think a whole lot. And for the most part, it works out fairly well, because in the back of my mind, I will think things through for a long period of time. And then what others see is, oh, she just makes a decision and off she goes. But what you don't see is that I've been brewing about it for a while in my brain. And then I go. But when I need to, I have pretty good style flexibility. Like, I keep striking that screen there. I have good style flexibility. So in a situation like that, I actually tap into my C, and I'll do an analysis. Like, I really analyzed. I looked at the books. I figured out what our cash flow was like. I figured out how long we had. I figured out what monies were coming to us. Like, I did all the stuff that I don't really like doing on a regular basis. I have a team member who does that and then gives me the report, the high level report. But I got into the numbers in a way that I wouldn't necessarily want to every day. And I started looking at, I just started scoping everything on a very, very analytical basis to know exactly what the current state of affairs was. And I have team members, and so we have, like wages and benefits and all these things that have to be paid for every month. So I knew exactly what our monthly expenses would be and all our subscriptions for a gazillion different softwares and things. I knew exactly where we were at and exactly where we were going to be every month. And then I knew what I needed to do. I knew the business case that I needed to resolve. And I just, like I said earlier, when you need more business, you just go out and get it. And that's what I did.
It's funny that you say you just go out and get it, because for a lot of people, they go, oh, I wish it was that easy. But again, I think that comes back to the discipline, correct? That you're using.
It does, discipline. And like when I said I was a competitive figure skater, I think there were a lot of really good lessons that I learned as a figure skater, or as a competitive athlete, because you do learn discipline. You learn that, I don't know if you're familiar with figure skating, but you throw yourself up into the air thousands of times before you ever start landing on your feet. You land on your head, on your shoulder, on your knees. You get, bruises of all kinds. And it takes discipline to do it again and again and again until finally one day it works. And that first day, like if you do, a common jump is an axle. So all of a sudden you land on your foot for the first time ever. And then it's like you could always do it forever because your muscle memory kicks in. And then you go and you just land it again and again and again and again and again. So it's like that with business. You figure something out and then you remember that and you just keep repeating that recipe again and again and again and again. And it works. And then, of course, markets change and things like that, and you have to evolve. But I think discipline is a huge one for me.
So a lot of people now are probably in that situation that you talked about a couple of years ago, where it really does feel like you're back to startup. And, because of all the chaos that's happening. What is it that you would say to people that are stuck in that fear about how do I step forward to move towards that discipline that you use so powerfully?
Well, I think actually, if I go back to about 14 years ago, we used to be a company that designed in-person training. My day was spent, I'd slug all my stuff to a room somewhere in a hotel or a corporate.
We have just frozen up there. Hello. Oh, sorry, Janet. We lost you for a second where you said you slug all your stuff to a room somewhere.
And then about 14 years ago, we started to transition to online learning because I could see that's where the future was. And at that time, I went to my first eLearning Guild conference. And I went there thinking, I'm starting all over from nothing. I know nothing. It's just a whole new career for me, a whole new... I thought I knew zero. But what I realized after the first day or so at that conference was that everything that I knew about teaching methodology and learning methodology was still true. It's just that I had to learn a new set of tools, electronic tools, in order to be able to carry that work out. So I think if you're freaking out right now about the world has changed, think about what you know is still valued, is still valuable and is necessary. That, and then hang your hat on that. Say, okay, so I have to learn a new set of tools to work with, but I still know all of this. And then when you realize that you're not like completely wiped out, it's not so bad. You're not starting from nothing. You're starting from somewhere. But you do have to learn. Like, that's the other thing I would say, Ravi, as an entrepreneur, you never get to the finish line, ever. Right? You never stop. You have to have an insatiable appetite for learning. You need to be a lifelong learner and engage in continuous learning every single day. And I don't know if this is oversharing, but often you and I will have messenger conversations early in the morning. I don't know if you've noticed that habit, right? It's because I set my alarm and I lie in bed for the first hour and with my phone or my iPad, and I look stuff up all over the world. I do go on all the social media channels because I think your social media is whatever you feed it, by the people you connect with, who you follow, and that sort of stuff. I know some people talk about having to stay off of social media because it's so toxic. Honestly, it's not my experience, and maybe that's just because of who I follow and who I connect with, but I see lots of really positive stuff. And it's a learning time for me every single morning. So before my feet hit the ground, I've actually spent an hour learning stuff. And it could be everything from BBC News and something that's going on somewhere in the world, or how to, change your lighting for Zoom meetings to make it better. Like, it's all over the place. But nevertheless, I spend that first hour every single day doing that.
And that's really back to your discipline. And I have noticed that I'm an hour ahead of you. So I'm already into my day when we start.
Yeah. But a few times I've said, I gotta go. I got a meeting starting in half an hour, and I'm still in bed. I gotta get a move on here.
Yeah. Now, that's one thing too. Is in terms of being wired in, that sounds like a discipline that you've got. That time is for the social media, but then you move on to other stuff. It's not like you get lost in the spiral of it.
No. I eventually have to get up out of bed, but I spend that time, and then I get up, grab my tea, do my body groove, unless I've spent too much time talking to people online or something like that, and then hit my desk, and I have a meeting with my team every morning at 8:30. We have what we call toast and jam, excuse me, for 15 minutes. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer. But it's a time when we all check in because everybody is working remotely, and we've never been more connected. Now that we're all working remotely all the time, we're more connected than we ever were before, which is awesome.
It is that way in so many ways, I find. Now, I totally agree with you about the ongoing learning, and there's always new levels, new stages, and you talk about how you've rebranded and such. The reality is you could probably sit back on what you've accomplished and live a pretty good life. And yet you're constantly looking more. What can I learn? What can I do? How can I help? How can I, more of that? What is it that drives that hunger for you to find more ways to help more, to do more?
I don't know. I'm sort of some sort of obsession, I guess, but maybe not always healthy. You would know that I sort of flirted with retirement a few years ago, and I joke about it because it lasted 8 days, and 7 of those I was on vacation, and then on the 8th day I returned home, and I'm like, now what am I going to do? So I decided a few months after that, then instead to expand internationally, because it was just like a frontier that I hadn't played in. My son had gotten to an age finally where I felt like I could be away from home more often, and I thought, if I'm going to keep working, then I got to do something that's going to push my buttons and push me to do things and that I haven't done before. So I hadn't done a lot of international work, so I decided, go big or go home. So I decided to expand to the Caribbean, and that's been huge. And I've tapped into all of the wonderful, amazing government support programs to help Canadian entrepreneurs who want to do business abroad.
Now, something there I want to touch on too. You talked about your son's getting older. When we were on the board together, I think you were doing more in-person training still at that point.
Yeah.
And you had built an amazing lifestyle. You've got a wonderful partner now, life partner now. But at that point, you were on your own. But you traveled with your son and your mother. And if I remember right, you were homeschooling him as well, correct?
Yeah, I even bought a 40-foot RV to give him a sense of home while we traveled. And I had to get a DZ license just to drive the darn thing. But I did. I mean, he has some special needs. And so for a number of years, one of his needs was that school just wasn't working for him. So I homeschooled him for about 6 years until he was ready to go back into the school system. And now he's able to make his own meals and, stay on his own and things like that. So we have a lot more freedom to go to the cottage for the weekend or to, travel to the Caribbean for a few weeks on a business junket. So a lot more freedom now.
But I love the way that you created the lifestyle. You hear a lot about how single moms have a challenge with being away for work. So you just took him along and the support system with your mom.
Yeah.
And you were able to do your work and yet still be with him.
Yeah, without my mom, it wouldn't have worked because she was there. He was too young to stay on his own at the time. So when I was doing in-person training, I think again, comes back to discipline. I only booked things on certain days of the week, and then I had negotiated with her that she would be there on those days. And she would take care of him, and she'd come out to our house before I even left for work in the morning. And then that way he was well taken care of. And I would leave the curriculum with her. She would carry on in my absence. So it worked really well. And she traveled with us in the RV and otherwise. So she was always in the background at conferences and things like that.
But I mean, I love the way that you were able to keep your life with him and do your work, run your company together.
Yeah, it was challenging. Trust me, it wasn't easy because there's only 24 hours in a day, and I haven't figured out how to get any more yet. But it was, again, it was the hardest thing was going from being teacher to mom at 3:00. We would have school hours from 9 till 3. And as we got better at it, then he got more independent about his schoolwork. And so I set him up with his own little office space in my office, and he'd do his thing and I'd do mine. And it was a tremendous amount of balancing. But at 3:00, school ended. He was off to be a kid. I could go back to being mom. And then at that point, I really put my business hat on and burned through a few hours of work until dinner time. And then after he'd go to bed, a few more hours before bedtime. So it was like, what do they say? You're stretching it. Like I really did stretch it during those years, but it worked. And I didn't grow my business a whole lot during that time. I mean, I grew it, but on a slow boil as compared to the last few years where I've really just gone.
Well, it's a balancing of priorities, right? He's a priority.
Yeah, and he was always my priority. In fact, he was in my 20-year plan that I talked about earlier. I knew when I would have children that that's when I would leave the any kind of job and have my own business full time. So that was always, and then I did my St FX Diploma program during his naps when he was a baby and all that sort of stuff. And then when he went to preschool, it was like 2 mornings a week. So I started working 2 mornings a week, and it just kind of evolved as he got older. And now he's old enough that I have lots of freedom.
Right. And I know for me, as a single dad, I would always book my trips away the week my son was with his mother.
Yeah.
But there were times too when we used to have our 2-day board meeting at the American meetings. He would come down, and I don't know if you remember, I hired Sherry's son to babysit him once.
Oh, yeah.
But it's all of that juggling. But you had him all the time, right?
Yeah, except every second weekend. And so for a long period of time, I had a client that required a whole bunch of Saturdays. So it worked out perfectly. I would literally leave on the 6:00 plane on a Friday night and be back on Sunday afternoon before he got home. And he never even knew I was gone, but I was able to work every second Saturday for that client.
So what would you say, what would you give as advice to mompreneurs, to single moms who are working and trying to juggle that right now? Their kids and their work. Any insights after your time?
I think if you have good support in place, like I said, I had my mom and that was amazing. So if I was late getting home on a flight, I could always call her and she'd be there to greet him. But it wouldn't have worked without her. I don't know. I think you have to make choices, and my choice is always clear. If I had to give up one thing, I would be in the sandbox. I would be on the floor playing. I would be playing with little Hot Wheels. There's just like no contest in my world. And even today there isn't. You know, today he's much older and able, so I could do a lot more. But if I was in Trinidad and I got a call that needed me to be home, it wouldn't matter how much the airplane ticket cost. I would be home on the first flight available. So, you know, I guess knowing your priorities. And there were times, I have to say, there were times when he was little and I was trying to build my business early on, and I found myself pretending. You know, I was sitting on the floor playing with Hot Wheels, but I wasn't really there because I also had my iPad right there on the side, and I was kind of watching something going on or emailing back and forth. And then I would catch myself and say, you're either here or you're not. Like, are you in this or not? And I aligned myself with clients in those early years, who understood and found value in that, and liked it and agreed with my philosophy. So to this day, actually I had this conversation with someone this morning. To this day, there's lots of people I just won't do business with. I know it sounds righteous, but if they don't share my belief and value system, they're not a good fit. We're not going to be happy together.
No, it's not righteous at all. I think you need to work with people that fit in terms of values, not just in terms of dollars.
Which makes it easier to find clients, because when you see a big crowd of people, right away you can rule out those who clearly don't share your belief and value system, and then that way you only have half as many people to try to charm, let's say. Oh, you're on.
To tie things up here, this is a really challenging time for everybody.
It is.
For business owners, for entrepreneurs, whether they're solopreneurs or they have a team with them, what I've heard from you, three things jump out. It is the discipline that you have. It is your priorities, as you spoke about with your son, and the passion that you have. What would I be on track with those three?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
What advice would you give to entrepreneurs, solopreneurs who are, don't know how to move forward because the way they did it is gone, but this is all a big unknown now? Any thoughts, any advice on how people can find their ground and move forward?
Well, I think you could probably, in that situation, I would probably get out my Post-it notes and my Sharpie and find a piece of wall and just brainstorm with myself, or if you have others who can engage in that with you, that's even better. But I would just brainstorm all the things that we could do. Not necessarily are easy to do or that you want to do or that even makes sense, but just you could do. Just don't be judgmental in that stage. And then start to, once you've run out of ideas, wait, pause, and then enjoy the silence, and then get some more ideas. Don't stop too soon, because we know in brainstorming people just generally stop too soon, right? So those deeper ideas are the ones that are going to be really valuable. So once you get through that second wave of ideas, then you can start to sort them. And you could sort them in different ways. You could sort them in, yeah, I would like doing this, or no, I would never want to have to do that. You can do it that way. Or you could sort them by easy and hard, or inside your control and outside your control, or big return on the investment versus little return on the investment. So you can sort them in different ways. And then choose something that is inside your control, has good return on the investment, and you actually, you have a little bit of passion about it at least. Like you're not going, like don't start with something that just sounds like torture for you, right? Start with something deep, something you can embrace. And then do it. Like you just have to do it. Pick something and do it. And then get that done and then go back to your board. Pick something else and do that. And work your way up to the harder ones, or the ones that you're not as, love as much, but are still worth value. If it's not worth doing, if there's not a decent ROI, don't even bother. Just slide it off to the side, put it at the bottom. Why would you do it if it's not worth it? Right? Doesn't even make any sense, right?
Yeah, I love that, Janet. Thank you so much. And thank you for stepping up to be the first in this series, because I know you don't do a lot of Facebook Live, so we've chatted. You were a little concerned about this and the focus. I hope we made it easy for you.
I not only survived it, I thought it was very fun, and I'm going to soon be asking you, how did you do that, Robbie? Because I want to know too. Thank you
Deal.
for teaching me something new. I appreciate it. Take a ballot, as I would say.
So thank you so much. And if people want to get a hold of you, you are at welovelearning.ca.
I am, and my email is just janet@welovelearning.ca.
Yeah, and thank you. This has been an absolute delight. And the only thing I want to mention, two things I want to mention to close things off is this week we're launching with a mutual colleague of Janet's and mine. We're launching a thought exchange study on entrepreneurship, on what do entrepreneurs need to be great at to thrive through these times and beyond. And the cool thing about this study is that you get to enter your answers, and then you will see what other people have entered, and you can rank them based on how important those are to you. And I know, Janet, you've done a thought exchange, right?
I love that tool. I think it's awesome. Is that you and David doing that?
That's right. Yeah.
I want in.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
I want to be in on that.
Okay, well, I'm going to put the link in the comments for this. It's absolutely free, and I've got when you go there, it's also anonymous, so don't worry about anything. There's also a link if you want the results on what is it that entrepreneurs feel they have to be great at to move forward. We'll send you the report. You just have to click in there and enter your information. So I'll put that link in the comments for here. And also tomorrow, we're going to move forward with another amazing serial entrepreneur, Dana Ferrant. And I'm excited for this. Join me for the next 22 shows over June, every weekday at this time. And let's explore the passion of entrepreneurship. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.
And